The morning patrol had started like any other. Gray clouds hung low over the Pacific, and the rhythmic hum of the Navy vessel USS Valor blended with the sound of the wave. Seagulls circled lazily above, their cries lost in the wind. On deck, a team of U.S. Marines stood ready for routine drills, maintenance checks, communication exercises, and a rescue simulation that had already become predictable. But this time, something felt different. The air carried a heaviness, a silence between the gusts. Sergeant Ethan Cole, the mission leader, leaned against the rail, scanning the horizon through his binoculars. He was a man shaped by the sea, broad shoulders, salt-flecked hair, and a gaze that had seen too much. To him, calm water never. It meant waiting. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It came faintly through the wind, a deep, mournful call that seemed to vibrate through the hull of the ship. Not mechanical, not human, alive. Cole froze, eyes narrowing toward the endless blue. "Sound off," he ordered quietly. The communications officer adjusted his headset, puzzled. "Sir, sonar picked something up. Large, moving slowly. It's not a vessel." The voice trailed off. Cole's gut tightened. "Put it on speaker." A low, resonant cry filled the deck, haunting and heavy, echoing like a song of pain. The Marines stopped what they were doing. Even the gulls seemed to fall silent. "What is that?" one of the younger men whispered. Cole didn't answer immediately. He had heard that sound before, years ago off the Alaskan coast. It was a sound that stayed in a man's bones. He lowered the binoculars slowly. "It's an orca," he said, "and she's hurt." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. A rescue mission wasn't part of their orders, but for Cole, orders were never stronger than conscience. He looked toward the horizon once more. "Get the Zodiac boats ready," he commanded. "We're going in." The engines roared to the Marines moved with ropes. Above them, the dark cloud kind that whispered of storms. Cole fastened his harness, his jaws. It wasn't just another day at the ocean had called, and the Marines were about to answer. Rain lashed against the deck of the USS Valor as the Marines lowered the Zodiac. The waves had grown unpredictable, surging higher passing minute. Lightning flickered somewhere beyond the horizon, not close enough to threaten, but close enough to remind them who truly commanded these waters. Sergeant Ethan Cole stood at the bow, his gloved hands gripping the railing as he stared into the gray expanse. The sonar operator's voice echoed through the radio. "Contact holding steady at 300 yards northwest. Movement is slow. Possible injury. Looks like he's caught in." Eyes narrowed. "Visual confirmation?" "Negative. The water's too rough." He exhaled sharply, scanning the dark line of waves. "We'll find her. Maintain comms." He turned to his team, 4 Marines trained for search and recovery. Corporal Reyes, the diver, Private Jensen, youngest of the group, Lieutenant Foster, the medic, and Gunnery Sergeant Cole's right. A man of few words. "Listen up," Cole said, voice cutting through the storm. "This isn't a drill, and it isn't just an animal. That orca's alive out there, and she's in pain. We get one shot at this before the weather closes in. You see rope, metal, netting, you cut it. You see hesitation, you move through it. Understood?" "Yes, sir," the team answered in unison. Cole nodded. "Then let's bring her home." The small crafts hit the water hard. Engines sputtered, then roared against the wind. Spray soaked their uniforms as they pushed forward into the open sea, following the coordinates. Minutes turned to half an hour. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, fog rolling in thick as smoke. But then a sound broke through. A deep, broken cry. Long, mournful. It wasn't just noise, it was communication. A plea. "Bearing 310 degrees," Reyes shouted over the wind. I heard it again. Cole adjusted the tiller, veering toward the sound. The fog split briefly, and there she was. A massive black and white shape bobbing weakly in the water, waves slapping against her body. The orca's dorsal fin drooped, her tail tangled in a web of fishing line and broken netting. Blood streaked the water in dark ribbons, spreading like smoke beneath the surface. "Jesus, she's huge." "Hold steady," Cole barked. "Get me closer." The boat inched forward. The orca flinched at the engine noise, rolling to one side, her breath ragged and heavy. Her eye, dark, glistening, human in its sorrow, turned toward them. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Even the sea seemed to wait. Foster leaned over, voice soft. "She's still conscious. Pulse is weak but steady." Cole watched her carefully. There was intelligence in that gaze, recognition. almost trust. He lowered his voice. "Easy, girl. We're not here to hurt you." The wind howled again, snapping the moment apart. "Reyes, get in the water," Cole ordered. "Check how deep those nets go. Harris, prep the cutting gear. Jensen, stay on the radio and keep comms open with Valor." Reyes gave a sharp nod, slipped his mask on, and dove into the freezing dark. Seconds passed, long, heavy seconds, before his voice crackled through the radio. "She's wrapped all the way down to the tail. Looks like steel cable mixed with fishing net. Must have been dragging this for miles." Cole cursed under his breath. That meant time and danger. The currents were rising, and one wrong move could cost them both the Orca and the diver. "Stay focused," he said into the mic. "You've got this, Reyes." He looked back at the Orca, who let out another low sound, softer this time, almost as if she understood. The rain eased for a moment, revealing a sliver of light breaking through the clouds. Cole glanced up. It felt like the sea was giving them a window, one last chance before the storm returned. "All right," he murmured. "Let's bring her back to the surface where she belongs." The sea swallowed Reyes whole. The cold hit like electricity, a shock that bit through the wetsuit and numbed his fingers almost instant, but he didn't hesitate. The light from above fractured into silvery beams as he descended toward the Through his mask, the massive shape of the Orca loomed, black and white against the dark green void, her flank rising and falling with labored. The tangled nets that bound her tail looked like a cruel spider's web, strands of fishing line, steel cable, and torn buoys twisting together. "Cole, I'm on her tail," Reyes said into his comms. His voice came distorted through the static. "Visibility's poor, but I can see the main knot." "Copy that," Cole replied from the Zodiac. "Take it slow. You're in control down there?" Reyes flicked on his wrist light. The beam cut through the dark water, revealing the scale of the damage. Deep cuts on the Orca's fin, bruised flesh, strands of rope embedded in old scars. She must have been dragging that trap for days, maybe longer. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing her skin, warm, trembling, alive. She shuddered, but didn't move away. "It's okay, girl," Reyes whispered, though the sea swallowed his words. "We're getting you out." He drew his dive knife and began slicing through the first layer. The net resisted, the cable biting back like wire. Pulse quickened. He cut again, sparks of light from his knife catching stray bubbles. Above the water, Cole watched the waves shift. "Status, Reyes?" "Still cutting. She's deeper than I..." Suddenly, a massive swell hit the Zodiac. The boat lurched. "Hold steady!" Cole barked, grabbing the rail. "Keep her off the hull." The Orca flinched as the wave passed, thrashing. The sudden movement dragged Reyes sideways, pulling him against the cable. His regulator slipped. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to fall. "Reyes!" Harris shouted into the... "Talk to us. I'm good. Just give me a second." He gripped the knife tighter, slicing through the final loop around her tail. The line snapped loose, recoiling like a whip. One of the metal hooks caught his forearm, tearing the sleeve of his suit. Blood clouded the water. "Cut's clean," he panting. "She's free." Above, the ocean stirred, not violently, but with purpose. The Orca began to move. Slowly, powerfully, she kicked her tail once, twice, testing her freedom. Then she rose toward the surface, the light catching her scars like silver tattoos. Reyes followed, his lungs burning, the beam of his light fading behind him. When she broke the surface, the world erupted in sound. A deep exhale, a spout of water bursting skyward. The Marines cheered, their relief cutting through the roar of the wind. "She's breathing," Jensen shouted. "She's alive." Reyes surfaced moments later, gasping for air. Cole and Harris hauled him into the boat. His face with eyes wide. "She's free," he said, voice trembling. The Orca circled the boats once, her massive body gliding through. For a moment, it looked as if she was inspecting them, memorizing the faces of the men who had come for her. Then, unexpectedly, she released a low, melodic sound, a series of clicks and notes that vibrated through the air like a song of gratitude. Even hardened Marines fell silent. The sound echoed across the sea, haunting and beautiful. Cole removed his cap, pressing it against his chest. "He's thanking us." Reyes smiled faintly, still catching his breath. "Then we did something right today." But before anyone could speak, the radio crackled again, the voice of the comms officer from USS Valor. "Sergeant Cole, radar just picked up movement heading your way. Fast. The storm front's closing. You need to get back now." Cole looked at the horizon, black clouds rolling in, the sea beginning to churn again. He glanced back at the Orca, who lingered near the surface as if waiting. "Let's move," he ordered. "We're not losing anyone, or anything, to this storm." The engines roared to life as rain began to fall again, harder this time. The Orca followed for a few seconds, then dove beneath the waves, a flash of white and black disappearing into the depths. Cole kept his eyes fixed on the spot where she vanished. "She's out there," quietly, "and she knows." The sea had turned violent. The first gusts of wind tore through the mist like invisible hands, and the horizon vanished behind a curtain of rain. The Marines aboard the Zodiac fought the waves, every motion a battle between balance and chaos. "Keep her steady," Cole shouted over the wind, gripping the motor's tiller. Salt water sprayed his face, blinding him for seconds at a time. The storm had arrived faster than predicted, the kind that no radar could truly measure, the kind that only men of the sea understood in their bones. Reyes held one arm tight against his ribs, blood seeping through his wetsuit from the cut. Jensen was clutching the radio, trying to keep the signal alive. "Valor, this is Alpha Team," he called out, voice breaking through static. "We're 2 clicks east of your last mark. Storm conditions severe, requesting bearing assist." A loud crack split the air. Lightning struck the water less than 100 yards away. The flash, blinding. The thunder that followed felt like it ripped through their chests. "Forget the signal," Cole yelled. "Eyes on the waves! We ride it out!" The Zodiac pitched upward, the bow rising high before crashing down. Each impact sent shock waves through their bodies. The engine sputtered, coughing salt water. They were losing power. Then, through the chaos, Harris pointed toward the starboard side. "Contact!" At first, Cole thought it was debris, a large, dark shape moving fast beneath the surface. But then it surfaced. The Orca! She was back. Her dorsal fin sliced through the waves, enormous and unbroken now, her body glistening with rain and spray. Once, powerful jet of a silver flame against the... "She's following us. She's trying to..." Cole stared at her, the storm roaring around. "She's leading." As if to prove him right, the Orca dove again and reappeared farther ahead, circling, turning back toward them, clicking, and calling through the storm. Reyes frowned. "She's signaling something." Cole's instincts sharpened. "Follow her." Harris hesitated. "Sir, we can barely keep this boat afloat." "Follow her," Cole snapped. "Trust the ocean marine." The words came from somewhere deeper than command. They were conviction, and somehow every man on that boat felt it. The Orca guided them through the fury, past crashing walls of water, past floating wreckage and tangled nets, into the storm's heart. For minutes that felt like hours, they followed her shape, flashing in the lightning, their silent compass in a sea determined to swallow them whole. Then, abruptly, the waves eased, the wind dropped, the air shifted. They had entered the calm eye of the storm. A vast, eerie circle of stillness surrounded them, clouds spinning in the distance like a living wall. No one spoke. Even the sea seemed to hold its... The Orca surfaced nearby, gliding slowly beside the boat. Her eye caught the flicker of lightning, dark, intelligent, almost human. Cole reached out instinctively, his hand brushing the water. "Thank you," he murmured. The Orca released a soft whistle, low and melodic, then dove again, this time deeper, vanishing into the silence. Reyes exhaled shakily. "You ever seen anything like that, sir?" Cole's voice was quiet. "Once, a long time ago, when I stopped believing in coincidences." The eye of the storm began to close. The wind picked up again, curling around them like a living breath. Cole turned the motor key. It coughed once, then roared back to life. He looked at his men, their faces lit by lightning and salt. "We're not done yet," he said. "Let's bring her home." "Wah." They rode out of the storm behind a single flash of white, the distant tail of the Orca breaking through the waves one last time before disappearing into the deep. The storm broke as suddenly as it had begun. By the time the Marines cleared the outer wall of clouds, the sea had quieted, not calm, but humbled. The sky opened above them, pale and endless, streaked with the faint glow of dawn. The USS Valor appeared on the horizon, its dark hull glistening with rain. The ship looked small against the vastness of the ocean, a floating fragment of order in an untamed world. Cole's voice was hoarse. "Radio contact now!" Jensen adjusted the comms, still damp with seawater. "Valor, this is Alpha Team. We're coming home. Repeat, we're coming home." There was a pause, static, then a burst of relief in the operator's. "Copy that, Alpha. We've been tracking your beacon. Get aboard fast. You're cutting it close." Cole exhaled, lowering his head for the first time in hours. "Roger that." They approached the carrier slowly, the ocean rocking them like a cradle. Harris gripped the tiller, steadying the boat. Reyes sat slumped against the side, his wounded arm wrapped tightly with gauze. Jensen kept glancing back toward the horizon, as if expecting to see a flash of black and white following them. But there was nothing, only the calm that comes after chaos, the kind that felt almost sacred. As the Zodiac drew near, sailors leaned over the rail to throw ropes and lower the crane. Their faces showed confusion at first, then awe. The Marines, salt-streaked, bloodied, exhausted, looked like men returning from another world. When their boots finally hit the deck, there was no cheering, no shouting, just silence. The kind of silence born from understanding something too big to name. Cole removed his helmet, his hair plastered to his forehead, eyes distant. The captain approached, his posture firm. "Sergeant, we received partial reports of your position. What in God's name happened out?" He could have said storm. He could have said nets. But instead he just said, "Life, sir. We found life, and we gave it back." The captain studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Then you did your job." Cole turned away, walking toward the rail. He looked out across the open water, the same horizon that had nearly swallowed them. The light was soft now, breaking gently through the clouds. Something rippled at the edge of sight. A single distant splash. Cole's heart stilled. There, cutting through the calm surface, was the unmistakable fin of the Orca. She was alive, and she was following them. The men gathered silently beside him, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The Orca surfaced once, exhaled, then slipped beneath the water again, leaving behind a spiral of white foam, like a signature written in the sea. Reyes whispered, "She came back to make sure we made it too." Cole nodded slowly. "Yeah, she's one of us." The men stood there together, boots soaked, faces lined with salt, fatigue, soldiers staring at something that made them feel small again, and somehow complete. No medals would be given for what they'd done. No headlines would tell their story, but the ocean would remember. It always does. As the Valor turned toward home, the waves rolled steady beneath, calm, rhythmic, endless. And somewhere in the deep, an Orca sang a low, haunting song that far beyond, a sound not of sorrow, but of gratitude. Cole closed his eyes, letting the sound walk. For the first time in a long time, he smiled. The mission, but something far greater. 3 days after the storm, the USS Valor reached the naval port of San Diego. The ship's hull was scarred, its flags tattered, but it sailed with the quiet dignity of those who had faced something far greater than battle. News of the mission had already begun to spread. It started with a radio transmission, a brief, garbled report intercepted by civilian channel. Within hours, whispers became headlines. Marines save injured Orca in Pacific storm. The story rippled across the nation like waves breaking on every shore. Reporters waited by the docks, cameras ready, but when the Marines disembarked, there were no smiles, no speeches, just men who walked with the stillness of those who had witnessed a miracle. Sergeant Ethan Cole stepped onto solid ground and felt the strange unease of standing still after days of motion. He had faced storms, combat, and chaos, but what lingered now wasn't fear. It was awe. At the pier, a small group of marine biologists waited, led by Dr. Asha Lin, a specialist in cetacean communication. She extended her hand. "Sergeant Cole, I read your report. What you and your men did out there is extraordinary." Cole shook her hand, but said nothing. His eyes drifted toward the ocean, glinting under the morning sun. "She wasn't just injured," he said finally. "She was calling. She wanted to live." Dr. Lin nodded slowly. "They do that. Orcas, they don't just survive, they remember. They communicate grief, loyalty, gratitude. If she survived, she'll come back." Cole smiled faintly. "Think so?" "I know so." That night, the men gathered at the docks, unable to. The city lights flickered across the bay. The air smelled of salt and oil. They spoke quietly about the storm, the fear, the way she had looked at them before vanishing. Reyes, his arm still bandaged, broke the... "You think she made it home?" Cole looked out into the darkness. She's stronger than we are. I'd bet on her. Then, as if the sea itself had been listening, something shifted, a faint disturbance in the still water, ripples spreading outward. "Sir," Jensen's voice was barely a whisper. Cole turned. Under the pale light of the pier lamps, the surface broke, a sleek black shape gliding just beneath the waves. Then another, and another, a pod. At the center, larger and slower, a familiar dorsal fin rose, the scarred one. The Orca surfaced, her breath misting the air in a silver cloud. She was close, no more than 30 feet from the pier. Her eye broke the surface, glistening like wet glass. Dr. Lynn stepped forward, stunned. "That's her. She found you." The men stood frozen, overcome by something too heavy for words. The Orca released a deep, rolling sound, a note that reverberated through the pier and the bones of every man standing. Dr. Lynn blinked back tears. "She's not just calling, she's singing." Cole knelt at the edge, water lapping against his boots. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't. He just pressed a hand to the surface of the water and let the waves touch his skin. The Orca lingered a moment longer, then dove, her tail lifting high before disappearing into the dark. The pod followed, vanishing as quietly as when silence was softer, not emptiness. Harris finally spoke, his voice low and reverent. "You think that means goodbye?" Still staring at. "No, thank you." The men stood there together until dawn painted the horizon. Behind them the city, traffic, lights, the noise of ordinary life. But in that moment, on that dock, they understood something few ever would. The ocean had spoken, and they had answered. Summer rolled in on a soft wind, the kind that warmed the pier boards by noon and left salt on the lips by evening. The storm was a memory now, not a distant one. It lived in the quiet changes that followed. Word had spread along the coast. Fishermen began cutting loose ghost nets before they drifted. Dive clubs started weekend sweeps for debris, and the Navy posted new markers along migratory lanes. No one called it a policy at first. It was just something people did, because of what they'd heard or who they knew, or because somewhere deep inside the ocean had touched them too. Sergeant Ethan Cole felt it every time his boots met the pier. He'd stand with a coffee cooling in his hand, watching the tide lift and lower the boat like breathing. He wasn't waiting, exactly, but he had learned to listen. Dr. Asha Lynn brought a small research array and set it up beside the harbor mouth, 2 hydrophones and a passive recorder. "They remember," she told him with a smile. "If she's nearby, we'll hear her. Maybe we'll hear them." They did. The first recording came at dawn on a Tuesday, a string of slow, descending notes, followed by a cascade of clicks that rose like sparks through dark water. Asha played it back, eyes shining. "She's healthy, breathing well, moving easily. Home." 3 weeks later, the pod appeared. It began as a shimmer at the horizon, faint splashes, then black arcs lifting clean from the blue. People along the seawall stopped mid-conversation. A boy dropped his bicycle. An old fisherman set his coffee down without looking away. The pod moved with purpose, not hunting, not hurrying, just arriving. Cole and Harris walked to the end of the pier without a word. Reyes followed, his arm fully healed but bearing a thin, pale scar that caught the morning light. The Orca surfaced 50 yards out. The scar along her flank had faded to a silver thread, and her dorsal fin cut the water the way a keel draws its line, assured, steady, whole. She exhaled. The mist rose and drifted toward them like a blessing. "Is she closer than last time?" Jensen asked, almost afraid to blink. "She knows us," Harris said. "She's not guessing." The Orca swam a slow circle, then paused, head angled toward the pier, one dark eye just above the surface. A small calf rose beside her, smaller and bright, mimicking her movements with the unsure grace of the new. The pier gasped as one. "Oh," she brought her child. For a long moment, nothing moved. The gulls, even the boat, seemed to hold still in their slip. Cole felt the world narrow to 2 sounds, his breath and the seas. Asha lowered the hydrophone cable into the water. The speaker picked up the calls almost instant, a deep, rolling phrase from the mother, then higher notes from the calf, question and answer, comfort and courage. The pattern was unmistakable. "Teaching," Cole swallowed. "She came back to show us. Jacques, include us?" The Orca pivoted, made a slow pass along the pier, then turned seaward. The calf followed, darting closer to the pilings and drifting kelp, curious and fearless. When it veered too near, the mother released a single, firm click. The calf corrected at once. Boundaries, safety, an old lesson, perfectly new. Farther out, 2 fishing boats idled with engines off, their crews standing at the rails with hats in hand. One of the captains lifted a coil of line, cut the frayed end, and tossed the scrap into a bin. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just nodded, a quiet agreement traded across. That afternoon, the Marines met with the harbor master, the Coast Guard, and a half-dozen fishermen in a borrowed boathouse. The plan they built wasn't complicated. It didn't need to be. Buoy markers for the migration corridor, a weekly debris sweep led by volunteer divers, a standing channel on the radio, Channel 72, Deep Watch, for any sighting or entanglement. The name arrived like a tide, Guardians of the Deep. No patch, no ceremony, just a promise. Will it hold? Jensen asked later. They coiled lines on. Cole watched the of sunlight fold into the... If we hold. That evening, the pod returned once more. Just as the water turned to glass, the sky forgot. The mother surfaced closer than before, close enough that Cole could see the fine constellation of scars along her jaw, the way the calf tucked just behind her wake. Cole knelt, set his palm to the water. We're here. He wasn't sure if the words reached. He was certain the intention did. The Orca released a low, resonant note that seemed to enter through bone rather than ear. The calf answered, right trill, and rolled, belly white, beneath the pier light, a flicker of play, stitched into the solemnity of the moment. Asha held the hydrophone against her chest, eyes damp. They don't just survive, she murmured. They belong. The pod turned and slid into the deep, leaving only ripples stitched with starlight. Around the harbor, a few people lifted their phones, then lowered them again. Some moments asked not to be captured. Some were meant to be. On the bulletin board outside the boathouse, someone had tacked a weathered index card. No name, no signature. Just a line written in a hand that might have been a fisherman's or a marine's. If the sea remembers, so will we. Cole read it once and felt the space behind his ribs grow wider, lighter. He looked out where the water met the night and thought, knew, that the bond would hold. Not because the world had changed. It began with a hiss of rain against the boathouse roof and the soft crackle of radios asleep on their chargers. San Diego wore a thin fog. The harbor lights floated like stars that had lost their way. Most of the village had turned in. The sea had. At 02:17, Channel 72 woke. Deep Watch, this is Marisol. We've got movement 2 miles south of the buoy line. Sounds wrong. Heavy breathing. Possible entanglement. Over. Reyes was already pulling on his jacket when the second call came in. From a night diver headed back to shore, voice tight with urgency. Copy Marisol 2. Confirm splashes and distressed calls. Sending coordinates now. The boathouse filled in minutes. Cole, Harris, Reyes, Jensen, the harbor master, 2 Coast Guard coxswains, and Dr. Asha Lynn, with her hydrophone case slung like a medic's bag. No speeches, no briefing. Just hands-on gear, and eyes meeting with the quiet certainty of people who knew why they were awake. Out on the water, the fog swallowed sound. The Zodiac engines ran low and steady, a heartbeat beneath the mist. Hydrophone in, Asha. Jensen eased the cable over the gunwale. A hush, then a deep, ragged call bled through the speaker. Not a song, a struggle. Bearing 52 degrees, Asha murmured, eyes closed, translating as if from a language she had never learned but always known. She's not alone. 2, 3 voice, one is young. Cole's jaw tightened. Let's find them. The fog tore open. A dark fin surged ahead and dipped. Lines cut the half-sunk buoys, snarl of rope, dragging like an anchor. The Orca rolled, breath explosive, flank flashing white. Beside her, a smaller silhouette matched her panic with fear. Mother and calf, Asha whispered. The calf's free, the mother isn't. Harris throttled down, letting the boat drift. Same drill, Cole said, voice calm. Reyes, you're on the blade. Jensen, you run spot. Harris, keep us from kissing the hull. Everyone stays quiet. Reyes slid into the water. The cold bit to the bone. He kicked once, twice, and the world narrowed to light line and living muscle. The main cable had wrapped low under the pectoral fin, cinched tight by a trailing knot. He could see where the rope had burned the skin to gray. Cole, I've got the choke, he said. I'll need slack. Copy. Harris. Feather us with the swell. No prop wash near her face. Above them the fog pulsed with distant buoys, and the slow churn of an approaching cutter standing by. Below, Reyes found the knot, pressed his chest to the Orca's side, and breathed with her, counting in, out, cut. The rope fought him. He'd changed angles, blade under the fiber, the knife working without tremor. The Orca shuddered, then stilled, holding him the way a storm sometimes holds its breath. Halfway, Reyes said. Almost. The rope snapped, recoiling like a whip. Reyes's mask jerked. A streak of salt and blood blurred his vision. He didn't pause. One more loop, he growled. Stay with me, girl. He slid the blade through the last coil. The line slipped. The whole snare went slack. Above, the mother burst from the surface in a column of breath and sound. The fog lit with spray. The calf squealed, a bright, stuttering trill that made Asha fly to her mouth. It was joy, raw and shy. Reyes surfaced, breath rapt, grin uncontrollable. She's free. Exhaled a laugh he hadn't known. Bring it in, Marine. They idled with engines off. The harbor around them existed and didn't. The fog turned the world into a room with no walls. The mother circled once, twice, then came alongside, titanic, and her eye found the boat, found them. Asha lowered the hydrophone again. The speaker hummed, then filled with a slow, resonant phrase. Long notes, spaced like footsteps in a cathedral. The calf answered with quicksilver burst. What are they saying? Jensen whispered. Asha smiled through tears. Home. They're saying home. Far off, the Marisol 2 clicked acknowledgement on Channel 72. Other voices came in. Divers confirming clear lines, the cutter logging the entanglement, fishermen marking the new drift with coordinates already headed to the bulletin board. No one said protocol. No one needed to. The bond had become a system. The story had become practice. Harris eased the throttle. The boat turned for the pier. The Orcas followed a while, then slowed, letting the distance open like kindness. The mother lifted her tail in a final, deliberate slap, white against black, against gray, against night, then vanished. They docked to the small sounds of rope over cleat and boots on wet planks. Lights in the village windows flickered awake, a few faces appearing behind glass, drawn by a feeling they couldn't name. Cole stepped onto the pier and looked back at the water. Fog drifted past. Somewhere beneath it, a family moved unbound. Reyes clapped his shoulder. You hear that? He asked. The speaker's off, Cole said. Reyes shook his head. Not that, Cole stilled. The harbor had its old rhythm again, the lazy knock of hulls, the whisper of tide against pylons, and underneath it something else. Not sound exactly. A rightness, a promise kept. Asha scribbled the time and coordinates in a damp field notebook and tucked it beneath her arm. Guardians, she said softly, almost to herself. It fits. They stowed the gear in the boathouse. Jensen pinned a fresh card to the bulletin board. Beneath the weathered line someone had left months ago. His handwriting was careful, like a vow. Channel 72 stays open. If the sea remembers, so will we. Cole stepped back, took it in, and nodded. He didn't salute. He didn't pray. He simply stood there with men he trusted and a sea he loved, and let the moment be whole. When they finally headed home, dawn was only a rumor, just a thin seam of silver where water met sky. The pier lights hummed. The radios dozed again. Out beyond the breakwater, two black arcs rose and fell in perfect time, then slipped into the deep. No medals, no headlines, just a bond that held. And if anyone asked, months or years from now, how a handful of Marines and a village learned to listen to the ocean, someone would point to a foggy night, a quiet channel, and a promise written on a pier, because some rescues end in cheers, but the most important one end in keeping watch.